Hey guys, so I decided to check out Blender this couple of weeks ago. I actually did first start with Blender before going with Blockbench, but at that time I couldn't understand how to navigate that software. But now I actually became fond of using Blender. As you can see in the video, this process would have taken me about half of my day to finish. But since now I understand why Blender runs like that, I was able to finish the mesh model in just 2.5 hours. I spent more time doing the UVs and texturing, which is what I actually kind of prefer. Now, if you guys are going to try out Blender coming from Blockbench, I do think that you should give it a week of testing since the way you manipulate meshes in Blender is vastly different. Also, you'll be using the middle mouse button and the shift a lot more. Shortcuts and keys are also a pretty big thing and are really important when it comes to learning Blender. Also, as you can notice, unlike in Blockbench, you don't simply drag your references into the 3D scene. It takes a while to learn, but there are tutorials for it in YouTube. I also am planning to do some Blender tutorials, but that would be when I have fully understood how I work in that software. But it's not all that different from Blockbench. Once you get a hang with the controls, it's pretty much just going to be a matter of modeling things. Now, since I have been making low poly models for about a good year now, I was able to transfer all of what I've learned in Blockbench to Blender. What I have to further learn was loops. I won't go into too much details about it, but it's basically just a loop of mesh that connects limbs to limbs. Also, modifiers. I actually like that I just have to model one side of the mesh and have it mirrored using modifiers. It's one of the things that actually made me make this model relatively quick. I know Blockbench have a mirror tool, but it's not as consistent as I would have liked. Anyways, though I might go and model fully in Blender, I still really prefer UV mappings in Blockbench. So, to do the UV mappings in Blockbench, I just had to export the model in Blender as an OBJ file. Then, I just import it into Blockbench. Since I texture meshes through segmented limbs, I first separated big chunks of the models into parts. I separated the arms, legs, and head so that I would have a much cleaner experience when doing the UVs. Also, since I technically have a mirrored left and right, I can just duplicate and connect the limbs once I finish the mappings. It saved me the hassle of having to do the UV maps of the opposite limbs. Now, I am familiar with the UV mapping tools that Blender has, but from what I have realized from the tutorials that I have watched, they mostly use a much bigger texture file than what I use. Not that I don't like it, but I have developed a preference towards pixel textures. Plus, when I do my textures, it's not just about having a good UV map to draw on your textures. I also make awkward UV maps to my liking and advantages. I use it as a style and a workaround to using a much smaller texture file. Plus, I enjoy that I have to move all the points in the UV maps. After I finished my UV mapping and texturing in Blockbench, I then export it again as an OBJ file in Blockbench, then import it into Blender. I first fixed the emission thingy in the shading tab to make it look more like how it looks like in Blockbench. I did share the nodes in my Twitter, but you can also see it in the video. I still have to learn a lot more about how the shading tab works overall, but at the moment I am happy with what I know. Also, another thing that made me want to do my modeling in Blender is because of the rigging. Personally, I do think that Blockbench has a good rigging system. It's just that after a year of working with it, I wanted something to be just a bit more fluid or bendy. I wanted to start making models as one mesh rather than doing all of the bones as a segmented limb. Making the skeleton rig in Blender was confusing at first, but once I've rigged a couple of practice models, I was able to wrap my head around it. I still am trying to learn more of how I want to rig my models, but now at least I know how bones work in Blender. Now, another more confusing side of rigging in Blender are the weight painting. At first, it really is a bit confusing, but after watching tutorials and reading some Reddit posts, I was able to understand the concept and process behind it. I actually really enjoy weight painting because when you do it properly, you could make your models move its limbs so much smoother than you could have in Blockbench. Anyway, I think that is all I have to say about Blender at the moment. I will still be practicing it in the next couple of weeks since I do plan on using Blender for my future commissions. I hope my rambling wasn't too long and that you guys enjoyed this one. I'll see you guys in the next video.